This evening, it is my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Lisa Eid, Professor of English at Oregon State University. Dr. Eid has been teaching rhetoric and writing at OSU since 1980. Her research interests include rhetorical theory and practice, current composition theory, new media and new literacies, and feminist, cultural, and critical pedagogical studies. Dr. Eid has authored, co-authored, edited, or co-edited 8 books, and her scholarly work has been recognized with awards for outstanding research from the Modern Language Association, the Conference on College Composition and Communication, and the International Writing Center Association. We're grateful to Norton Publishers for sponsoring her appearance here. Please help me welcome Dr. Lisa Eid.
When I told colleagues that I was coming to Texas for this conference, they said, well, what's your role at the conference? And I said, I am the dreaded after banquet speaker. So I want to assure you that I am aware of my role, that I have a written talk. I will not be ad-libbing, and I have tried to keep things as succinct as I could. It's a real honor for me to be at this 2014 Texas Community College Teachers Association Conference. I'd like to thank Association President Carol Lowe for the invitation to speak at tonight's banquet, and TCCTA staff members Richard Moore and Carol Hawkins, who have provided truly incredible backup and assistance. And I would also like to thank W.W. Norton as well for supporting my participation at the conference. It's really great to be in San Antonio, cold as it is, a progressive and vibrant city that is thriving, and thanks in good part, though keeping with our theme of collaboration, not solely responsible for his leadership. And it's even better to have the opportunity to learn from the diverse community, group of community college teachers and administrators who comprise the TCCTA. I will admit that the thought of addressing such a diverse group was initially somewhat daunting. As you know, the range of areas represented in section meetings for this conference is really impressive. From agriculture, biology, and business administration, to hospitality and nursing education, to writing, reading, accounting, forensic science, and office and welding technology. This diversity is real, but it is a diversity that grows out of and reflects shared commitments to your students, your communities, and to education in general. In my experience, these commitments are shared by dedicated community college faculty across the country who, like you, play such an essential role in ensuring that all students have access to higher education and succeed in higher education when they come to our colleges. But as I learned in preparing for my talk today, there are some unique opportunities and challenges facing community college teachers in Texas today. Perhaps I shouldn't have been surprised that a state as big as Texas should have Texas-sized ambitions for its higher education system. I am thinking here of initiatives like the ACGM Learning Outcomes Project, undertaken by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, which, as you know, is working with 2- and 4-year faculty across the state to develop student learning outcomes for some of the most frequently taught courses. This project reflects the growing national emphasis on student success, and my guess is that it will serve as a model project in that regard. There's a lot at stake in the ACGM project, from very significant investments of time on the part of faculty members and other stakeholders to bottom line budget consequences that are real. I'm sure if we had time, you could fill me in on many other important collaborations with which you and your colleagues are engaged. After all, the opportunities for powerful and productive collaborations in colleges and universities are many. They include collaborations between faculty, within and across units, between faculty and administrators, between faculty and students, between students in various educational settings and contexts, and between community colleges and the diverse communities they serve. These collaborations represent exciting opportunities, but as you are no doubt aware, collaborative endeavors pose challenges as well. In the time remaining, I hope to suggest some ways that those engaged in collaborative projects can maximize positive outcomes and minimize difficulties and challenges. Perhaps my most important suggestion will first strike you as hopelessly general or hopelessly commonsensical. I don't mind the common sense charge, as I have a healthy respect for common sense. And my suggestion, it is that as much as we might yearn for them, there are no one-size-fits-all guidelines that can guarantee successful collaborations. In my talk today, I'll be emphasizing the situated nature of collaboration and the value of a flexible, rhetorically sensitive approach, one that asks us both to interrogate our own experiences and to try as much as possible to inhabit the experiences of those with whom we wish to collaborate. Why am I calling attention to the importance of interrogating our own experiences? Perhaps an example will help clarify my point. All of us in this room are educators or in some way support higher education. As I have mentioned it, whether we like it or not, collaboration is a fact of life for us. We have department meetings, college meetings, reports to write collaboratively, pedagogical innovations, such as the implementation of the new ACGM learning outcomes that require collaboration. We are involved in professional associations, such as the TCCTA. As educators, we should have numerous strengths to bring to the collaborative table, and we do. But our background as successful students and educators might bring some potential limitations as well. Consider this. Many who choose to become educators do so because we have excelled as individuals in the educational system. As students, we were rewarded primarily for solo accomplishments. After all, we get individual grades for individual courses. I don't know about you, but as a student, I have to admit that I dreaded group work. I hated the loss of control that it entailed, and sometimes I found myself working with peers whose commitment to their education and their grade wasn't as strong as mine, and I had a really serious commitment to my grade as a student. Once we become teachers, most of us liked the degree of freedom in our classrooms that teaching affords. And as teachers, we are evaluated primarily on our individual accomplishments. So there's a potential tension between the strengths we develop to succeed as students and teachers and the skills we need to develop to collaborate successfully. There's also a potential tension between the way our work as teachers is valued and rewarded and the important role that collaboration needs to play in our careers and on our campuses. Mismatches like this can cause educators to avoid collaborative work, to resist it where it can't be avoided, or if we do willingly engage in collaborative activities, and I think of the really important work that so many people involved with this organization are voluntarily doing, to find our work undervalued and inadequately rewarded. My co-author, Andrea Lunsford, and I have experienced the devaluing of collaborative work, in our case, collaborative writing, firsthand, and it was this experience that catalyzed 30-plus years of research on collaborative writing in particular and on collaboration in general. Here's our story. Longtime friends in the early 1980s, Andrea and I, who at the time were both untenured assistant professors, decided really almost by chance to collaborate on an essay for a collection honoring a beloved professor. We did so, and we were surprised by how much we enjoyed the process of writing together. We enjoyed it so much, in fact, that we continued to write together. We found doing so productive and stimulating. We especially appreciated the fact that our collaboration emboldened us to take on projects that we might have been unwilling or unable to tackle on our own. Our colleagues, however, felt differently. The professor in whose honor we wrote our first co-authored essay, for instance, expressed astonishment and dismay at our desire to write together, insisting that we would never get tenure if we continued to do so, even though we were careful to publish individually as well as collaboratively. And his was just the first in a long chorus of concerns, one that reflects the deep resistance to and devaluing of co-authorship in the humanities. And I'm going to be talking about Andrea's and my experience as a kind of case study. I recognize that only some people in this room are involved with the humanities, but I will be making connections between this and larger situations later in my talk. Andrea and I are, I guess, stubborn. The more our commitment to writing together grew, the more we wanted to challenge the academic norms that were constraining us. And believe me, being told that you will never get tenure feels like a pretty big constraint if you're an academic. The more we thought about it, the more it seemed to Andrea and me that this resistance to collaborative writing in the humanities was unproductive, especially since it influenced not only professional but also pedagogical practices. After all, don't people in a whole range of professions write together routinely? Shouldn't writing teachers be preparing students for the collaborative work that they will undoubtedly undertake on the job? Increasingly, we felt that there should be a place for collaborative writing assignments in our writing classes, particularly first-year writing classes, and there was not. So what began by accident and continued because we enjoyed writing together and found it productive turned into a major research interest. In 1984, Andrea and I applied for and received a substantial FIPSE-funded grant and began a multi-stage, multi-year study of collaborative writers at work in business, industry, and the professions. We did so by exploring the collaborative writing activities of members of 7 professional associations: the American Institute of Chemists, the American Consulting Engineers Council, the American Psychological Association, the Professional Services Management Association, and the Society for Technical Communication. For the first stage of our research, we surveyed 200 randomly selected members of each association. Our goal in this initial survey was to determine the frequency, types, and occasions of collaborative writing among members. And yes, we found that members of these associations did regularly collaborate in writing with others. 87% of our respondents indicated that they sometimes write as members of a team or group. Of this same group of respondents, 58% indicated that they found writing with others productive or very productive, and only 4% indicated that it was not at all productive. 98% of the respondents to our first survey, by the way, rated writing as important or very important to the successful execution of their jobs. After analyzing the results of this first survey, we developed a second questionnaire, a longer, more open-ended instrument to be completed by 12 members of each of the 7 professional associations. The selection of respondents was not random but intentional, in that we chose members whose first survey results indicated that they found writing collaboratively with others largely to be a positive experience. In the third stage of our research, we held on-site interviews with at least one member of each professional association who responded to the second questionnaire. These interviews ranged in length from several hours to several days, and they happened at sites throughout the United States. And as you can imagine, these interviews proved invaluable in helping us to gain an in-depth understanding of collaboration in action. Andrea and I published the results of our study in our 1990 Singular Text Plural Authors Perspectives on Collaborative Writing. Since that time, many scholars have studied collaborative writing, especially in the world of work. In that context, our research has made a difference, but it has been harder to affect change in other arenas. When Andrea and her co-author Karen Lunsford, for instance, conducted a 2008 study of errors in a nationwide sample of student writing, they could not identify a single essay that had been written collaboratively. So the norms against major collaborative writing assignments in required first-year writing courses still remain very strong. Nor has resistance to co-authorship in the humanities lessened. The fact is that if you are an English professor at a research university, the single-authored monograph remains a gold standard and a minimum requirement for promotion and tenure. Some of you in the audience may be scratching your heads right now. You always thought those English teachers were a little weird, and this might be confirmation of that. And certainly, Andrea's and my experience is a reminder that the academy can be a pretty strange place, especially if that place is a research university. Andrea and I did a fair amount of head-scratching ourselves as we gradually realized that something deeper and more ideologically grounded than a lack of data on collaboration in the world of work was playing a key role in resistance to co-authorship in the humanities. So a couple of years into our research, we revised our agenda and undertook an extensive historical and theoretical study of the development of intellectual property, authorship, and copyright in the West. Time constraints prevent me from discussing this complex subject in detail tonight, but I can tell you that Andrea and I learned that ideologically driven forces came together over a period of several centuries to valorize the individual subject and author, as well as intellectual property and copyright. And of course, copyright is certainly an issue for us in the 20th century, and intellectual property. Central to the process were assumptions about how different kinds of writing are valued and identified or not with the individuals who wrote them. To concretize this issue, you might think of texts as existing on a continuum. On one end of the continuum, the end most highly valued by our culture, authors are named, and especially in literary works, those authors most often are single individuals. Think Leo Tolstoy, Virginia Woolf, Jonathan Franzen, Toni Morrison. At the other end of the continuum, the one where a huge amount of the day-to-day work of our culture gets done, are texts that most often cite no authors, technical manuals, for instance, although they were certainly written by one, or in many cases, more than one person's. And in between are texts like the report that established the ACGM project, whose authors are named in the document, but their agency is minimized. So that those quoting the report are likely to say the report suggests rather than the authors of this report suggest. You might think of my comments up to now, as I said, as representing a kind of case study of how assumptions about authorship and intellectual property have informed one domain, the humanities, at a very deep level. I hope that you already see that while the situation in your disciplinary or professional area may be different, and personally, let's hope that it is, it cannot be free of similarly ideologically grounded assumption and practices, if only because collaboration is such an exquisitely human activity. Your challenges may be different from Andrea's and mine. Perhaps you are thinking about how best to implement the new ACGM learning outcomes in a class that you've taught for a long time. Part of you may want to resist taking these outcomes seriously. After all, you've taught this class for quite a while now, and you feel you have an insider's understanding of your course and your students. And yet, you also very much want to participate in good faith in what for Texas is a really major and significant curricular and pedagogical activity. This is a specific and concrete situation, one that requires us to inquire into our own personal and professional responsibilities. In a situation like this, guidelines about collaboration can only go so far. In Singular Text Pearl authors, Andrea and I do summarize at a general level what we learned about effective collaboration in the world of work. Here's what Andrea and I describe as an emerging profile of effective collaborative writers at the time that we conducted our study. They are flexible, respectful of others, attentive and analytical listeners, able to speak and write clearly and articulately, dependable and able to meet deadlines, able to designate and share responsibility, to lead and to follow, open to criticism but confident in their own abilities, ready to engage creative conflict. 24 years later, I would not disagree with this summary, but when I think about how specific, concrete, and situated virtually every collaboration is, it's easy to recognize what is missing from this profile. It doesn't consider the ways that our own experiences as students and teachers who excelled as individuals might influence our attitude toward and involvement with collaboration. It doesn't address issues of race, class, and gender that we know are so important in any situation where humans work together, issues that became quite clear in our interviews. And it doesn't consider the way that disciplinary and professional norms can exert profound influences on our assumptions and practices. So as I move toward a conclusion, I'd like you to think about your own individual experiences as a student and teacher. How have they influenced your approach toward collaboration? How conscious of and responsive to issues of race, gender, and class are you when you work with others? I would also like to invite you to think about your own disciplinary or professional field. What assumptions about collaboration function as normative? They are so commonsensical that we don't really examine them. We just take them for granted. How might you work to challenge these assumptions and practices if you disagree with them? While the humanities still privilege individual authorship, for instance, a number of professional associations have written protections for those who write collaboratively into important P&T documents. For some of you, I would expect that collaboration is built into your work and is a positive and rewarded norm. Others of you may be in fields where hierarchies of value favor individual rather than group achievement. Or you may regularly engage in collaborative activities, value them, find them valued by colleagues, and nevertheless wish that these activities could be more productive, effective, satisfying, and efficient. Productive, effective, satisfying, and efficient, these are the primary descriptors that Andrea and I have used for decades now to describe collaborations that are working well. Think about it. I'm sure we can all remember collaborations that were productive and that they got the job done, but we might not have experienced as effective, satisfying, or efficient. The report got written and the project completed, but pretty much everybody involved was unhappy with the compromises they had to make and experienced the process as neither satisfying nor efficient. Of course, thankfully, the opposite can occur and does occur. There are certainly many successful collaborations where those involved take pride in the product, value the process that led up to it, and feel that they have personally benefited from this process. Just as we encourage our students to reflect critically on their experience, to assess their strengths and limitations and set goals for themselves, we can also benefit from similar self-critique. A heavy dose of empathy for others, a willingness to stand in their shoes, can also go really far in encouraging successful collaborations. I'd like to make 2 final points. One point relates to the reference to disharmony in the title of my talk today. Disharmony in collaboration can be negative and frustrating, especially when it's the result of problems with interpersonal or group dynamics. And we've all seen this and we've all experienced this. But another kind of disharmony, the kind of disharmony that is a result of substantive conflict, where group members hash out ideas and priorities, is one of the primary benefits of collaboration. Thanks to this kind of substantive disharmony, group members are able to reach a goal and produce a product that they literally could not have achieved on their own, and they recognize that and value that. They have learned from the process, and any frustrations they might have experienced along the way are viewed in that perspective. I mention the latter, frustrations, because one reality of collaboration that I'd really encourage you to try to keep focused on as you're collaborating with others is that collaboration externalizes the processes that lead up to the successful completion of a project. If we are writing a report or an article on our own, we tend to take responsibility for our own process and to minimize or forget difficulties. Yes, I am finishing this report on 1 a.m. at Monday morning, we might say to ourselves, because I just had to watch both Downton Abbey and Sherlock on Sunday night. But that was my choice, and I take responsibility for that. When we work with others, that we are aware that we are losing at least some control of the process and can experience difficulties and challenges much more viscerally, and they tend to stay more at the forefront of our consciousness. Keep this in mind when you find yourself fretting because a colleague won't let go of a point that seems to you either obvious or unimportant. The colleague might be seeing something that you don't see, and if you let the discussion play out, you may ultimately find out there was an important point after all. You just needed their help in seeing it. Remember also that when a process is externalized, you can get helpful information that can guide future endeavors. And this is true for us as teachers as well as it is for us as colleagues collaborating in a variety of ways. A heated departmental discussion of how you will collaboratively agree to implement new ACGM learning outcomes for a particular course may have its moments of frustration. But if your collaboration is working well, the result will be worth the effort, and you will also have a fuller, more nuanced understanding of your colleagues' goals as teachers, both in general and for this particular course. I'd like to leave you today with this thought. Collaboration takes time, and it can have its challenges and frustrations, but it is, I would argue, a powerful and compelling means for exploring new ideas and effecting significant change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Eade, for sharing your insights with us tonight. We appreciate it very much.